Many people talk about emotion in music, and some works are considered more emotional than others. It is, for instance, far more likely to hear a Tchaikovsky symphony being described as an emotional work rather than any contemporary piece. Yet, does this imply that neo music is without feeling? Or is it that it simply resists any easy classification? As a contemporary composer, the idea of writing an overtly emotional piece has never really appealed to me. I have certainly never sat down with a piece of music paper declaring, and now I will write something emotional, something to make everyone cry and shed tears. Shouldn't music, if effective, provoke a response without necessarily needing to prescribe one? Stravinsky once remarked that music is powerless to express anything at all. Now, this sounds quite provocative to my ears, but I take it to mean that music is not necessarily a language of fixed meanings, like words. It does not tell stories, nor does it confess feelings as a diary might. Perhaps Stravinsky was suggesting that the moment a melody is said to be grief or a chord to be joy, meaning and the musical discourse becomes simplified. This seems almost an intentionally anti-Wagnerian stance. Roger's Sessions expressed a similar idea, but more gently. He said music merely suggests emotions. Let's take note of the word suggests. But remember, suggests does not mean dictates. Hints does not mean defines. According to Sessions, the space between suggestion and certainty was what gave music its richness. We can think of composing as the creation of an object rather than bleeding one's vulnerabilities on a piece of paper. A piece of music is built, shaped, and refined until it can stand on its own. Listeners then encounter it on their own terms. This approach contrasts quite sharply with that of pop music. Pop is sonically attractive, brief, brilliant, and almost like a dazzling display of fireworks. Impressive as this is, it often seems to offer a narrow bandwidth of emotional content, at least at present. Most of the emotions tend to focus towards lust, desire, a drug hazed longing, existential crises, or even high minded political posturing, all of it pre packaged in 2 to 4 minutes of music. These generalizations can seem simplistic to some of you, but we can all agree that pop thrives on immediacy. It delivers a jolt, a clear message, and ready made emotions. Of course, this is needed and is highly energizing at times. But isn't it also quite a limited way of experiencing life through sound? Doesn't music that opens doors, rather than telling you what to feel, allow for more exploration, subtlety, and even surprise? A lot of my colleagues and friends consume music outside of the classical tradition. We have had several conversations about how nostalgic pop music is for them. They seem to attach memories of specific incidences in their lives to particular song. Like this song reminds them of a breakup, or that one reminds them of a time someone smiled at them. While this is all very sweet, I have found that my own listening experience with contemporary and classical music is quite different. I have never thought about being in love with someone when listening to Elliott Carter's Concerto for Orchestra or Messiaen's Turangalila Symphonie. Instead, the experiences have remained fresh, whether it was 10 years ago or even if it is now. The listening experience remains unpredictably joyful, exciting, and visceral. The emotions don't seem to be micromanaged, yet the music's vivid trajectories, musical discourse, and dramatic itineraries create lasting images and imaginative spaces for reflection. I was once struck by something the composer Raymond Dean told me. He said, "I prefer not to spell out emotions in my music or in my program notes." Strange as it may seem to some, this line made a huge impact on me. Perhaps this is the difficulty most listeners have with music that resists imposition. It requires them to listen actively and deeply, to make up their own mind, and, perhaps most challengingly, to be confronted by their own raw feelings. Still, I do not dismiss guidance as useless. I believe titles matter exactly for this reason. A well chosen title is a doorway into the work. It nudges the imagination, suggests an atmosphere, sparks curiosity, and can sometimes greatly prompt the ear to a meaningful and engaging listening experience. Composers have often used titles in many inventive ways. Milton Babbitt, for instance, gave his work colorful and often punning titles: Beaten Paths, World Series, All Set, or even Foreplay for four musicians. Get it? Betsy Jolas's recent piano concerto B Tunes takes an Apple Music playlist as its starting point for formal development. Now, this is an extremely clever way of linking everyday experience with formal exploration. Titles have always been poetic or evocative. Debussy's Preludes, for example, offer great insight into this. He often placed suggestive titles at the end of each piece rather than at the beginning, allowing listeners to hear and imagine before being told what to picture. Pieces such as What the West Wind Saw or The Terrace of the Moonlight audiences evoke vivid atmospheres, yet the listener is free to conjure their own response first, letting the music guide their imagination. Messiaen's From the Canyons to the Stars or Catalogue of Birds similarly suggest landscapes, nature, colors, and moods, giving a starting point for the imagination and for interpretation. The music itself does the rest. The one piece of mine which most overtly deals with emotion is Navasa. It is a suite of 9 piano pieces, around 20 minutes long, based on the 9 emotions or rasas in the Indian performing arts. When Parvez Modi premiered this piece in Germany, a reviewer described it as an abstract painting of the emotions. I was rather pleased with this description. Rather than a sentimental illustration of each rasa, the pieces explore them as sonic materials, translating states of feelings into form and gesture. For example, joy may shimmer, but it does not necessarily smile. Love may lead to beating hearts, but the beats may not necessarily be as a steady pulse. Fear may tremble, but it does not resort to the tropes of horror movie music. Emotions are suggested, reflected, refracted, and even reimagined, leaving the listener freedom to discover their own relations to these emotions. Navrasa exemplifies a broader principle I believe in, that emotion in music ultimately emerges through the interplay of the sounds and the listener. By offering suggestions rather than directives, music becomes a space for discovery, reflection, and surprise. If certain works, especially contemporary pieces, are called unemotional, it is only because they refuse to spell out what is already known. Instead, they ask the more challenging question directly: what do you feel when you hear this piece of music?